Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Scott Ritter and Joe Lombaardo. Joe has recently come back from England and we're going Europe basically, and we're going to talk about the dire situations that the people in Europe are facing and why it's important to let everybody know about it. So, Joe, you were there for how long?
Um, I was there from the middle of May until October 5th, so a week and a half ago.
So the US sanctions, would you say that was primarily the cause of most of the hardship right now over there?
Well, I think all of Europe is having a lot of hardship. I think a large part of it is due to the sanctions that the US and Europe has imposed upon Russia. In some sense, they shot themselves in the foot because Russia provides a lot of the energy for Europe and some of the energy for the United States. And so by sanctioning that, they will have a shortage of gas and oil. Additionally, Russia is the main producer of grain in the world. It's the largest producer of grains in the world. It's the largest producers of fertilizer in the world. So that means that it's going to affect food prices and transportation, of course, which is dependent upon energy, affects everything too, from food prices to any goods that are, bought and sold on the international market or even the local market. It greatly has affected all of the countries of Europe. I did spend some time in a few of the other countries also while I was gone. I spoke at the anti-NATO protests in Madrid during a NATO meeting and at protests in Germany also. All of them are feeling the same crunch. So right now in Britain, for instance, there's double-digit inflation, and at the same time, they have had uh, um, a contracting economy. So they have a recession. There's people losing their jobs. There's a lot of strike activity that's going on because the government is saying, although there's double-digit inflation, when you come for a wage increase, you can't get that back because if you do that, they say will be further inflationary. So, in other words, they're asking all working people in Britain to take a pay cut with the effects of inflation to make less money this year than they did last year while prices are going up. So there's a crisis. And as you know, the former Prime Minister uh, Boris Johnson was thrown out because of the economic situation in large part, but also because his total disdain for the laws that he set, having parties during COVID when he said nobody else could and things like that. But the person that took his place is Liz Truss, and she was elected by almost nobody. She was just elected by the individuals in the Conservative Party, and about most of them didn't even vote. And of the ones that did vote, about 30% destroyed their ballot, saying they didn't want either of those people. And right now, the Conservative Party, which had a super majority in their parliament, is about 20 points behind in opinion polls of the Labour Party. The Labour Party has its own problems. I don't think that's going to solve the problems of Britain. But right now, there are real serious problems. You would see every night on the TV people saying, I don't know how I'm going to make it through the winter. I can't afford the gas prices now. If the gas prices were let to go to the market value, it would be 5 times what it was last year. But they did put a cap, which makes it at only 2.5 times what it is last year. But people can't afford that either. So there's some things that Liz Truss did to try to solve the problem, but all they did was make it worse. And it looks like yesterday she had to fire her finance minister, and it looks like she will soon be out too. So it's very clear that the government and the economy in Britain are in real crisis.
So, what's going on in Europe? Do you foresee a winter where the United States, will suffer as far as people can't not affording their heating oil and other important necessities of life?
Well, we already have a high inflation in the United States. It's close to 10%. It's close to double-digit inflation. And we're in better shape than Europe in that we get less fuel from Russia. Um, and we have our own fuel sources to some extent. We're even selling some to Europe right now in liquefied natural gas, but we're not selling very much because we're starting to see that we need it too. So that's also hurting um, Europe. So I think there'll be problems in the United States, especially during the winter, but I don't think they will be as bad as they are in Europe and in Britain right now.
Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I'm not an economist, so I can't sit here and give you great Keynesian theory. Uh, but I do study energy security and things pertaining to that. Um, let's just talk about the sanctions of Russian energy again. You know, I've said this before, and I'll just say one more time. To call Russia a giant gas station disguised as a nation is the greatest insult imaginable to the Russian people and the Russian nation. However, if you're going to go down that simplistic route, make sure that in your analogy, you're not a car going on a long distance trip that's dependent upon the gas that comes from that gas station. And then you decide to boycott that gas station, only to find out that you're stuck in the middle of nowhere with an empty tank and nowhere else to get your gas, because that's what the world has done when they've sanctioned Russian energy. They've literally shot themselves in the foot. They've put themselves, in a situation where there are no viable alternatives. Either there isn't sufficient supply, or the supply that is available is outrageously priced. To give you an example, liquid natural gas coming from the United States, it was, I think the price was $300 per unit. I can't remember if they do billion cubic meters or they use some other unit for liquid natural gas, but it was $300 per unit. Right now it's $3,000 per unit, and that price may go up. And it's not just about the price of the gas, the ships that operate the gas. There's demand on the ships, so people pay to get access to the ships. The ships have literally priced themselves out of business. No one can afford to book a liquid natural gas ship right now because no one can pay for it. So even if there was sufficient supply of American liquid natural gas, nobody can afford it right now in Europe. So we've shot ourselves in the foot. The only person profiting here are American energy producers who, this is beyond windfall profits. This is sickening super profits. And what's the ultimate irony here is that while we're enjoying this, reaping the benefits of what we have sown, we're demanding that Europe cap Russian energy, that they so we can charge whatever the heck we want to for our liquid natural gas, but God forbid the Russians be allowed to sell their energy at the market rate. So we're demanding that Europe cap it. Now the Russians have said, anybody who caps our gas or oil, you're not going to get energy. So it just further digs a hole for Europe. But here's the other irony. What did we think we were going to accomplish by doing all this? Do we not understand that if you are, in fact, a gas station disguised as a nation, that you might actually understand the business of global energy better than the consumer? And the Russians know this better than anybody. They are global experts on energy. Some people say, well, the Saudis are too. I say, no, the Saudis are regional experts on energy. The Saudi Arabian government has, for many years now, subordinated itself to American foreign policy. The reason why Aramco built up excess production capacity in Saudi Arabia was that Saudi Arabia could, on the instructions of the United States, increase oil production or decrease oil production to keep the price to America's satisfaction. And this has worked for decades. It doesn't work anymore. Why? Russia. See, Saudi Arabia, if you recall, last July, Joe Biden crawled on his knees to the man who he said, I will never meet this man, MBS, Mohammed Salman. He said, I will never meet him. He's a pariah for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. We will isolate this nation. We will treat them with disgust, da, da, da. He crawled on his knees, shook his hand, hugged him, danced with him, did whatever he had to do to beg the Saudis to increase their oil production. At that time, the Saudis said, well, we'll consider it, but we have to wait until the August meeting of the OPEC plus. What is that plus? Russia, which means that Joe Biden's begging for additional oil production had to go through a process where the Russians got to decide. So Russia, again, think about it. Russia is the one making the decision on whether or not they're going to increase oil production. And Russia and Saudi Arabia just got together and they said, nah, not only are we not going to increase oil production, we're going to decrease it by 2 million barrels a day. Why would they do that? Well, we'll see. While Joe Biden desperately needs low oil prices because of his dim political prospects this November, one of the things that he's selling to the American people is the notion that he is a responsible manager of our energy security and he will lower the price at the pump. Well, how has he lowered the price at the pump? By artificially dumping oil from our national reserve into the market. And I think, I mean, he's lowered it, to the lowest level since 1982 or something like that. So he's damaging U.S. national security for his own political benefit. Sometimes you think you want to impeach a president for doing that, but no, he's dumping our oil. There's not too much oil left to dump. He was hoping the Saudis would increase oil. They're not. He's screwed. Sorry to use that language, but pretty much that's where he's at right now. The Saudis turned their back on him. He begged them. He got on the phone pleading, please, 1 million. All I need is 1 million barrels a day increase. Please, anything you want, whatever you want. The Saudis said, no. Why? Because Russia needs $70 a barrel oil for their economy to work. They do their budget pegged on an average price of $70 a barrel. The United States was trying to lower that price. The Saudis have already played the oil pricing game. They have this project called Saudi 2030, which is this grand investment project where they're going to buy into infrastructure, have this game-changing transformation of the Saudi economy and Saudi society as well. But it's pegged on having oil at about $70 a barrel. The United States wants oil to be below $70 a barrel. Why? A, it's cheaper for American producers. B, it makes American oil competitive. The Saudis are tired of underwriting the American economy. They realize that the future is to the east with China, with India, with Russia. Saudi Arabia has just made a dramatic pivot. They told the Americans for the first time to stick it in your ear. They're not doing the bidding of the United States. Saudi Arabia is now pricing their oil in a manner that benefits Saudi Arabia, benefits the oil producing world, not the singular economic desires of an American president desperate for some sort of momentum that'll carry him through the midterm elections. And then, lastly, when we take a look at this issue of energy, the dollar, the petrodollar has been sort of the peg for the world for some time now. The U.S. dollar is, the global reserve currency. The Saudis are selling their oil to China for Chinese currency. They're selling their oil to India for Indian currency. They're selling their oil to Russia for Russian currency. They're selling their oil for anything but the dollar. The world is starting to transition away from the dollar. This is bad news for the United States. This is bad news for the Western world. The euro, believe it or not, is pretty much dependent upon the dollar for its long-term viability because the euro is a global reserve currency only insofar as it relates to the dollar in terms of stability. The euro is about to tank. European banking's about to tank. Want to know the importance of energy and security to the world? Ask the Deutsche Bank. Ask the Swiss bank that's about to go into. They're over leveraged in energy, in the energy world. They basically they have no money. There's no liquidity. They're about to collapse. This is going to be bigger than Bear Stearns. This is going to be bigger than the 2008, 2009 crisis. This is going to be huge. Why? Because the United States bought a BMW that chugs gasoline, and we had the audacity to sanction the only gas station that sold the gas we need. That's what happened. We mocked the Russians. They're better at this business than we are. They're better at leveraging their influence in the global energy market than we are anymore. And so this isn't just about Europe going down. The United States can have significant problems too, because we don't peg our price based upon the fact that we are nearly energy sufficient. Our oil and our gas is sold on the global market. So when global prices go up, the cost of everything goes up for the United States. America is going to feel a pinch this winter. Prices are going to go sky high. The cost of heating your home, the cost of running your car, everything is going to go up unless the government does something that it's never done before. Come in and regulate prices. But I thought we were a free market society. Maybe not so much anymore when the free market is actually a path towards economic suicide.
So, Joe, what do you envision in Europe and the United States this winter?
Well, I agree. It's going to be tough for people this winter. I just think we're in a little bit better position than Europe is right now. However, in the long run, it's very bad for the United States. And a lot of it has to do with the things Scott was talking about. You know, the United States, with its sanctions, it has sanctioned about 42 countries around the world, and they're getting together to try to figure out how to get around these sanctions. And as part of what they've done in the sanctions is they've stolen money from other countries. So they just took the money, for instance, from Venezuela, another big oil producing country, that was in the banks. The refineries for Venezuelan oil were mostly in the United States. The Citgo gas stations were Venezuelan gas tanks. We just stole them. We took them. That's piracy. But Britain did the same thing. Most countries store their gold in the British Bank of London, and they just took $1.3 billion of Venezuelan gold. Then they did the same thing to Russia. They just took their money that was in the banks. So why would anybody want to trade in dollars when on the whim of the United States, they can just be taken? You know, so it's sanctions. We consider it legal. When they talk about rules-based society, this is what they're talking about. The rules that are set in Washington that favor the United States and allow them to do all sorts of illegal activity. All of the sanctions, unless they are from the United Nations, are illegal, these unilateral sanctions, yet the United States does it all the time. So I think the US now is going to be in a bad situation in the long run. We've always had a situation where the American working class, American workers were better off because slightly better off, not like the very obscenely wealthy in the United States, but they were better off because of the domination the US had over all of these other economies around the world through the International Monetary Fund. We get them in debts, we make them privatize parts of their economy so the US can take money from that. We make them pay back high rates for their debts, and that comes back in one form or another to the United States. The United States isn't going to be able to do that anymore because the whole economic structure, which was dominated by Washington and Wall Street, is switching and is becoming more equitable around the world. There's other poles of interest in China and in Russia and in other places, and none of the third world countries, none of the global South is really following these sanctions. These sanctions are only U.S. and European sanctions. And that says something, that says a lot. So there's going to be a shift that in the long run is going to hurt American people. And the only way to get out of it is for the American people themselves to make the kinds of changes that are needed. And I think when more and more people are hurting and you start seeing these gas prices, you start seeing the kinds of things we did see in England, where they said, okay, inflation is high, but your wage increases are not going to be as high as inflation because that's more inflationary. So I think there will be some reaction and rebellion against that. And I think in that rebellion and in that reaction is the hope to find the power to make the kind of definitive change that would make it a more equitable society in the United States and around the world, to end US imperialism and to make it so that underdeveloped economies can start to develop and we can have a more equitable world. So it's going to be difficult for American people for a while, but I think in the long run it will be better for all of us.
So, Joe, was there a lot of demonstrations that you saw dealing with this economic situation?
Well, here's the situation. I believe that the powers that be in England really want to get rid of the Tory party, want to get rid of the Conservative Party, and they want to have the Labour Party come into power because it's headed by a very conservative man named Keir Starmer. And he's basically purged the left wing of the Labour Party, which is a much better group of people, in my opinion. And they want him in for the same reason that often they want the Democratic Party in the United States, or they want the labor leaders to help push unpopular things among working people. You know, if a real conservative does it, working people rebel. But if someone they think is a good person does it, they're more likely to accept it. So they want the Labor Party to push an austerity on the people of England, people of Britain. And they think Keir Starmer is the person to do it. And they're 20 points ahead, and the Labour Party is 20 points ahead in the polls now. If there's an election now, they would sweep the elections. However, there are protests, and these protests are coming together with the unions, which have a much better leadership than we do in the United States of unions. They have a real class struggle leadership, and the left wing of the Democratic Party. And they've started organizing in Britain these things called Enough is Enough rallies. And they're in cities all across the country. And they thought they were going to be of a certain size, and they got auditoriums that can hold a couple of thousand people. But there was only standing room outside in these things. Everybody came together for these. So it's the progressive population and political groups. It's the left wing of the Labor Party, which mostly has been purged from the Labor Party. People like Corbyn, who was fired from the Labor Party because of his positions, basically in support of Palestine, and um, uh, and others are coming together and holding these big rallies. They have the potential, I don't know where they will go, to really build something outside of the present political structure, because it's the political structure in Britain and in the United States that's the problem. Outside of the political structure that eventually can perhaps make the kinds of changes that are necessary and perhaps build a different kind of society. You can't have something as they do in Britain, where at the same time they're asking working people to make sacrifices, they are giving gifts to the wealthy. They used to have a cap on how much bonuses bankers could make. They got rid of that cap. They said that will help our economy. The top level of taxes for the highest paid people, they got rid of that level of taxes. And how are they going to make up for all this, the money that they're losing from this? They said they will borrow money, and that borrowing will eventually come back to the working people to pay for it. So I think there has to be basic structural political changes in these societies in the United States and Europe for there to be the kind of change that can be effective and help people. And when there's movements outside of the traditional political structures, I see some hope for that.
Scott?
Well, I can't add on to what Joe said. He's the expert on social movements, et cetera. I can talk about energy security some more, just some interesting highlights about that that'll influence some of the economic things that the social impact on the economic impact on European society. Two things. One, the United States attacked a pipeline. Nobody's talking about it. We ignore it.
Absolutely.
But the United States attacked Nord Stream 1 pipeline, Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Why do I say that? Well, just real shortly, there's three things. If I were going to try somebody in an American court of law on a purely circumstantial case, I need to demonstrate three things beyond a reasonable doubt. One is intent. Well, when you have the President of the United States stating straight up in public that if Russian tanks cross into Ukraine, he's going to shut down Nord Stream 2, end it. That's sort of a confession ahead of time. This next thing is cui bono, motive. Who benefits? Enter Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who instead of expressing sorrow, alarm, condolences to Europe for losing a $12 billion piece of critical energy infrastructure, speaks of the tremendous opportunity these brings about for American natural gas and to shut Europe off from Russian gas. It's practically a confession. And then the third thing is means. And of course, we had the US Navy doing an exercise right over the spot of the Nord Stream attacks in June. What were they testing? Underwater unmanned vehicles, UUVs. One in particular called a Sea Fox. Why is the Sea Fox important? Well, in 2015, we found a Sea Fox nestled right up next to a Nord Stream 1 pipeline. So they have the weapon, they've tested, it's there, present. I could convict the United States in a court. No one's talking about this. No one's talking about this. Europe is silent on this. Germany is afraid to hold an investigation. Swedes held one, gathered the evidence. They know who did it. They're not going to talk about it. The Danes, there's nothing to see here. Russia, they won't let Russia investigate, but Russia already did. And Russia says, we have the proof. We know who did it. And at some point in time, it'll come out. But the reason why I bring this up is that we just killed Germany's ability to be an energy hub for Europe. That was the goal. Germany was investing in this 55 billion cubic meters of gas annually coming in from Russia that was going to distribute not just to German consumers, but European consumers, and we killed it. Victory America, not so fast. Two things. One, Turkey has something called the Turk Stream pipeline. Now, there's just one of those right now that comes in, and Turkey always said, we're going to be an energy hub. We're going to be an energy hub. And the arrogant West and the United States and Europe, the Germans, no, you're not. We are the energy hub for Europe. We're that and all that. Well, not anymore, Europe. Germany just got blown up by the Americans. Russia came out yesterday and told the Turks, we'll build a second pipeline. We'll call it Turk Stream 2. Ironic. We're going to develop you into an energy hub where you can supply Europe all the gas at once. Russian gas, by the way. And Turkey's on board. So if we thought we were going to shut down Russia's ability to supply Europe with gas, think again. Now, what are we going to go blow up Turk Stream pipeline? Well, we already tried that. The Russians fouled it up. But, so Russia is, again, the smartest player in town. The other thing that's happening is Iran, that we've sanctioned to death. The Iranians just said, hey, Russia, why don't you ship all the gas you can into northern Iran and we'll absorb it into our economy up there. And then we'll just compensate by selling more gas down here. And it'll be the equivalent of Russia shipping gas out to the world. Russia's benefiting all around. And these high gas prices, they impact the world. What is Russia able to do? Turn to the world and say, oh, you're paying too much. We're going to discount, but they're going to discount at a price that was higher than what they were selling it when this all began. Russia's raking in money, hundreds of billions of dollars per quarter profit. We haven't done anything right here. Everything we've done is stupid. The United States has everything we touch dies. Literally, everything we touch dies. We haven't done one good thing in recent history, especially in the energy security market, whereas Russia's the opposite. Everything they touch comes to life. Russia's thriving, Asia's thriving, anybody but Europe and the United States is thriving. I'm not saying the Russians are without fault. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that They're doing this better than we are. They're winning, they're prevailing, and we don't have a solution. Why? Because we are the most ignorant people in the world about the world we live in, especially when it comes to Russia. Ask the average American what he knows about Russia, and he'll say one thing: Putin. He doesn't even know anything about Putin. He's just been programmed to say Putin, Russia, Putin, Russia, Putin. Wrong. Russia is Russia. Russia is a massive country with massive potential, with a deep history, a deep culture, a religion, a language. Why do we have to take it down into one person? Because of fear, because of ignorance. Russia is so much more complicated than that, complex, wonderfully complex. And until we take the time to learn about Russia, we'll never be able to come up with a solution for Russia, because we'll be solving the absolute wrong problem. If we think solving the Russian problem revolves around Vladimir Putin, we're solving the wrong thing. Russia is more complicated than that.
Joe, final thoughts?
Well, I just want to say that the anti-war movement in the United States is starting to come back out in the streets after a period of being almost invisible, and very, very divided. And this coming week, starting tomorrow, there's a week of actions that are going to take place in about 60 places around the country and in Canada. And I want to urge people to join with us in any way they can in this area of the country, in the Albany area. Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace will be holding their normal vigil on Monday from 5 to 6, which will focus on the US wars, their threats and attacks and provocations towards Russia and towards China. And these will probably not be giant actions, but it's a first step in bringing back the movement, which I think in this coming period is going to be very important. So I urge people to come with us. There's two sides of this war. One is the shooting war that we see. The other is the economic war that we've been talking about. And the US is going to be severely hurt in that economic war. And there's already thousands that have died in the shooting war, and we've got to end both.
Scott, in our final moments, plug your book.
Well, before I plug the book, I'll plug something that Joe talked about. I think November 15th, there's a meeting in the Bethlehem Library.
That's right.
It's going to talk about Ukraine. And Joe, I promise to do my best to attend.
That would be great.
I'll be in the audience listening to everything you guys have to say. On October 26th, Wednesday, I'm actually doing a book signing event at a wonderful place called Farmers and Chefs. You can read about it on farmersandchefs.com, or you can call the owner, John, at 845-337-4949. It runs from 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. It involves a dinner, so it's delicious food. Price of the ticket for the food includes a book. The author, me, is going to speak and take questions, and then I can guarantee you that he's going to stick around and sign every book that people want signed. So it's a great opportunity to talk about Russia. The book's called Disarmament: The Time of Perestroika, Disarmament and the arms control in the end of the Soviet Union. It's not just a piece of history, though. It's a book that also provides a template of hope for how we can use disarmament as a vehicle to get the United States and Russia out of the current predicament. Because we live in very dangerous times. Nuclear weapons are once again front and center in everybody's mind. And someday this war is going to end, and the United States and Russia are going to have to figure out how to live in peace. And this book shows how at one time, in a similar environment, we created this one brief shining moment, this Camelot-like moment, where arms control created the potential for peaceful coexistence. So come, I'll talk about the book. We can talk about history. We can talk about current events. But most of all, we can talk about how to make the world a better place.
But people cannot attend that evening, and they want to get it online. Where is it available?
Online, the book or the event?
The book.
Well, the book can be, you can purchase the book at Clarity Press. So go to claritypress.com. They're the publisher. You can also get it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. But more importantly, you can get it at local bookstores. All you have to do, for instance, if you live in the town of Delmar, is go to I Love Books and say, I want to buy Scott Ritter's book, Disarming the Time of Perestroika, and they will order it for you. In fact, if enough people ask for it, they'll actually put the books on the shelves. It's amazing how that works.
Great. I hope you sell 1 million of them, Scott. You've been listening to Scott Ritter and Joe Lombardo. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. So, Joe, welcome back. And Scott, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm sure we will be talking again. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.